Good. Let me turn on the laser pointer. Just a minute. Yeah. Okay, we are good to go. So, hello guys, good evening. Welcome to another live problem solving session for the course Introduction to Semiconductor Devices, which is being conducted by Professor Naresh Kumar Imani. Just to introduce myself again, I am Soham Lakhote, currently a fourth year PhD student at IISc Bangalore, working under Professor Gaurav Banerjee in the area of analog and RF circuits and system design. So now this will be the organization. Like we will first have one session, then we will take a break of 5 to 10 minutes, and then we will resume the session. If you don't find any references for the images which have been put in the slides, most of them have been taken from either the lecture materials or from Donald Niemann's book. Okay, and just for the sake of formality, all the lectures are being uploaded to this particular YouTube channel, and I hope you all are able to access the recordings. And in the description section of each video, you will be able to see the link for the presentation folder. So in that folder, all the lecture notes are being uploaded. Okay, so now before beginning the session, let me just make one quick correction which I from the last lecture. So in the last lecture, I had told you something regarding the sub threshold swing, right? And I had told you that the sub threshold swing should be as high as possible. So I take that statement back because I because the formula was actually the units of the formula were millivolts per decade, and this was the formula that I had told you. Its units are since ID we are since we are telling that ID should change in the decades, that is the order of magnitudes, right? So this formula's units are decade per millivolt. So you can see both of them are exactly opposite of each other. Correct? So this is not actually the formula. So the sub threshold swing, right? Sub threshold swing is actually inversely proportional to this formula that I had derived. Dou ID by dou Vg. So please make this correction or else you will get all your answers wrong. Okay, so what does this actually mean? How much millivolt of change in the gate voltage of the MOSFET will result in a decade change in the current? So and we already know this value, right? It is somewhere close to 60 millivolt per decade. Correct? So this on the only meaning of this value is that if I change my gate voltage by 60 millivolt, there will be a 10x drop in the current. So if my MOSFET was on and I was getting a current of maybe let's say 1 microampere, correct? Then if I move my gate voltage 60 millivolts beyond the threshold, that is below the threshold voltage by 60 millivolts, then I will be getting 100 nanoamperes of current now. So just a 10 times reduction. Okay, so please make this correction or else you will get all your answers and everything wrong. Okay, so now we have what we have studied is the main concept for today's week, that is all the 5 or 6 lectures which were there in the week 10. So most of them focused on the scaling of the MOSFET as well as some short channel effects, right? So now for today's lecture, I don't have a lot of numericals. We only have 2 numericals, but today's lecture will be very important from the practical point of view. I will try to give as many real world examples of possible. Like we will look into the structure of, we will also relate the scaling with the chat GPT that is very trending today, as well as I will tell you how circuit designers based on these scaled MOSFETs and all, they choose the what technology node suits them to design circuits, like circuits, analog RF circuits for the 5G applications, as well as the circuits which are required to be there in your automotive radar which is there in your car, right? So today's lecture is not what you can say a numerically intensive lecture. It will be more of a conceptual plus some practical importance type lecture. Okay, so first let's go through the scaling, and first of all let me tell you what does this 3 nanometer technology actually means. So even sir must have told you this, but you know TSMC is continuously reducing its technology node from 22 nanometer to 14 nanometer, then they went to 7 nanometer, then 5, and then finally 3 nanometer, correct, where they are fabricating the latest Apple processors, correct. So this initially when this was not just a branding or this was not just a marketing gimmick, So this length actually correspondent to the gate length of the MOSFET. I'm talking about the long channel devices only right now for this particular diagram. So this was my gate, this was my drain, and this was my source. So when the devices were longer, right? So this length, this technology node actually used to represent this length. That is the gate length that was actually present. But now this 3 nanometer is just a marketing gimmick. It is just a marketing gimmick. It does not represent this gate length anymore. So what you can say, they tell this 3 nanometer as if the gate length is 3 nanometer, but actually it is not. And let me prove it to you. So this table that you are seeing over here, it has been taken from the presentations of one of the highly reputed conference. Sorry for not putting the reference because I myself don't remember this reference. I just had this image stored somewhere in my PC. So now what you can look over here, when the technology node over here that you are seeing 14 to 16 nanometer, this is what the industry named it as a technology node level. So they will market this as if it is a 16 nanometer process or a 14 nanometer process. But if you come to the bottommost row, right, what you are seeing over here is the physical gate length corresponding to this node name that the foundry is using for the marketing purpose. So this 1614 nanometer node actually had a physical gate length of 23 nanometer. Now when you come to the 7 nanometer marketing node, it actually had a 16 nanometer of gate length. If you come to this 5 nanometer, then it has almost 13 nanometer of physical gate length that is actually under presence. So now what does this 3 nanometer actually means now? So we have already understood that it is just a marketing gimmick. It does not represent the physical dimensions of the gate length over here. So now you know that the scaling that is being done today. Okay, somebody wants to join. Okay, so you know that the scaling that is being done today, it is not a constant field scaling. So in the first lecture, sir must have told you about the constant field scaling versus the generalized scaling. So we don't have the constant field scaling anymore. So now this 3 nanometer is nothing but they are telling as if I had actually fabricated a 3 nanometer physical gate length transistor or something like that, right? So then the performance that you would have achieved, now currently we are achieving using the physical gate length of this 13 or 11 nanometer itself. So what they are doing some kind of scaling. They are getting good performance improvement. So it is the equivalent of 3 nanometer technology. Even though let me just write it, even though the physical gate length that you are seeing, correct, it may be maybe closer to maybe let's say 8 to 10 nanometers, correct, but the performance you are getting as if you would have fabricated this 3 nanometer physical gate length. So that is the performance that you are currently getting. So it just tells you that this 3 nanometer is better than the 5 nanometer, which is better than the 7 nanometer. So it is just the equivalent name. It is just the marketing gimmick. It is not the actual gate length that is present for this particular MOSFET. So just remember this stuff. If anyone asks you what does this 3 nanometer technology node means, just tell them it is a marketing gimmick. It does not represent this physical dimension. Of course, there is some correlation. I mean, if you reduce from 7 nanometer to 5 nanometer to 3 nanometer, this physical gate length, as you are seeing in this table, it will keep on reducing, right? But the performance, in comparison to the performance, it is just what you can say, it is a kind of marketing gimmick which just tells you that our current technology node is better than the previous technology node. Okay, so I hope that is very much clear. Now this diagram again has been taken from the lecture material. It just tells you how important the scaling is, and this is where I would like to bring the concept of the ChatGPT as well. Correct. So first of all, this is the one of the trend that I want you to observe is this trend. So you can see from the year 1970 to 2020, that is almost 5 decades, how much we have increased the transistor count in the same amount of area, right? And now you ask me why this is so important, because see these ML models, the large models and all, it was not like they are just invented 1 or 2 years back. Many people must have done their PhDs and research in bringing up the models which made today's ChatGPT. Correct. Now, what was stopping them from implementing it physically? It was the amount of power consumption and the amount of area they would have required to implement that model. So now, what do I mean by that? Let me just give you an example. Right. So by the way, how many of you know a basic structure of a neural network? Do you guys know there exists a layer of neurons like this? And if I consider this particular neuron, right, it is getting inputs from all the previous neurons that are there in the previous layer. So if I try to take the output of this neuron, it is nothing but, let's say this is W1, W2, W3, right? And I'm getting X1, X2, X3 as a input from the previous layer. So its output will be nothing but W1 X1 plus W2 X2 plus W3 X3, right? So this is what a very basic, what you can say, without using any non-linearity, this is what the output of this neuron will look like. Now what is this actually? This is nothing but, I can clearly represent it in the form of the vectors like this, correct? So now if you ask what is this, this is just nothing but the matrix multiplication, correct? This is nothing but just the matrix multiplication. And now what is happening for in this chat gpt is that this particular model, the chat gpt-3, has so many parameters that are inbuilt into it. What do I mean by parameters? So these are the weights that I'm talking about. There are some biases also that are present. I don't want to make it very complicated because I'm not supposed to teach neural network over here, but I just want to tell you these weights and these biases, right, that you're seeing over here, this is what constitutes the parameter of the neural network, correct? Now the thing is, how are we going to store these parameters? I will need a large storage device, correct? I will need a large storage device. I will need a very large storage device having a very large amount of memory, correct? So now for storing all these parameters are crazy amount. You can just search it on the Google. So now first of all, why I brought you to this slide is because of this increasing in the transistor count. So this kind of models were existing from the long time. The only thing that was preventing the physical implementation was the amount of memory required and the amount of computing power required to train such models. It will be very difficult to do such kind of model implementation 10 years back or 15 years back, because I was not able to put as many transistors in the given amount of area that I am able to put today, correct? So this is what has enabled the implementations of this large language models, correct? So that is what I wanted to tell you. Just appreciate how this multifold increase in the transistor counts per unit area has actually helped to implement this kind of models, that is the chat gpt kind of models. Okay, so this was one of the first point. The next point that I want you to tell is, why did we move to multi-core processors? Why did we move to multi-core processors? It was simple reason that you can see my frequency of the processor was increasing over here. It became flat after certain, from this particular point, correct? I was not able to increase it beyond this particular point. And so the one of the main reasons sir must have given you is the RC delay, correct? So what does this RC do actually? So this RC delay is nothing but, if I have a MOSFET over here, right, and this is a clogged input, correct, and I have a C over here. So now I have to charge this capacitor very quickly, and also discharge this very quickly. Now if I give a very high frequency input, I may not be able to charge this capacitor quickly compared to the clock period that I am actually giving, correct? So this puts certain limitation. And if you go into the advanced course like in the VLSI, there you will study a concept called as static timing analysis, correct? So when you study this static timing analysis, the concept of setup and hold time will also come. Once you go through this, right, you can watch some YouTube videos, you will clearly understand why the frequency has actually saturated. But I still want to improve the performance, right? So what can I do? I can use multiple core processors and I can distribute the load across many different cores, maybe 4 cores like this. So some tasks will be assigned to this core, while other tasks will be done by these 2 or 3 cores over here, correct? And now just to give you one typical example, how much power does today's modern processor consumes? So if you take the example of maybe Intel i7 processor that is there in your laptop or maybe on your PC, it typically consumes somewhere between 120 to 150 watts of power. This is a very high number, correct? So now, does it really make sense to have this 150 watt of number? So let's just take this number. So what is the power consumption? So it is nothing but V into I, correct? And what is the supply that I'm giving to these modern day processors? it is close to maybe 1 volt. Correct? So the current that I am consuming out of this supply, when the processor is running on the full load capacity, it is close to 150 ampere. Now this number may seem extremely ridiculous, correct? But now if you divide this number by maybe let's say 50 billion, correct? So if you divide 150 by 50 into 10 to the power 9, correct? Then what will be this number? This will be come out to be around 3 nanoamperes. This is just a, I'm just assuming that each transistor in the processor is consuming equal current. That is obviously not true, but it at least help us to estimate what is the current consumption per transistor. Correct? So now it came to 3 nanoampere. So the seemingly ridiculous number that I was telling you, it's suddenly started to make sense the moment I put a 50 billion transistors on chip. Correct? So now this number started to make sense now. Correct? So this 120 watt. Now why I was not able to increase the power over here, like I could have made more powerful chip, more powerful processor, right? It would have helped ChatGPT to consume less amount of power. It would have saved them millions of dollars. Now was why I'm not able to do that? Because when you consume such a huge amount of power, what actually happens? See, when you consume such a huge amount of power, the temperature near the like where the temperature of that chip will go up, right? So if I'm not able to remove the heat that the processor is generating very efficiently, then that temperature buildup will start to occur, and that temperature may fail many transistors that are present in the processor. Correct? So now I will just write over here. So as power consumption increases, the temperature, the heat that the processor will produce, it will increase. Correct? Now this will affect the reliability of all the transistors as well as the processor which I have designed over here. See, when you design the processors, these are always designed from some temperature range, maybe minus 50 degrees Celsius to maybe some number like maybe 100 degrees Celsius or something. Very not maybe 100, maybe something like 80 degrees Celsius or something like that. Correct? Now within the processor area, right? Let's say these are the 4 cores that I have. Correct? If this is having a very high computational load, then this may create a local heat map over here. The temperature in this region will increase so much, and I had only ensured that processor will work only up to 80 degrees Celsius. Now if this temperature reaches 100 degrees Celsius, this processor may even burn, this core may even burn also. Correct? So now if the limitation over here is that I am not able to remove the heat generated by the processor very efficiently. Correct? And that is why I cannot increase the power beyond this particular value. Correct? So I hope till this point it is very much clear. So now coming to the ChatGPT, so I just want you to take a note of this, how many processor cores and the graphic cards it has used. Correct? So 2,85,000 processor cores it has used, and 10,000 GPUs, that is the 10,000 latest NVIDIA GPUs it had used. Correct? Now just assume that even if I am able to improve the power performance, that is the power consumption by 5%, if you calculate the effect on this total, the 2,85,000 processor cores and this 10,000 GPU cards from the NVIDIA, just you can see how much power you can actually save. And how much does it cost that OpenAI to train this model like ChatGPT 3? It costed them around $3.2 million in the computing resources alone, because they wanted to use such a huge computing power over here. Correct? So that's why I was telling you, when the performance from node to node, even if it improves by 10 or 15%, if you calculate its effect on such a model where it is using 2 lakhs processor cores as well as some tens of thousands of GPU cards, it will be humongous. Just do the cost analysis, you will get the number. Okay, I hope till this point it is very much clear. Now coming to the scaling, so generally the scaling actually started with the constant field scaling first, and then we moved to something called as generalized scaling. Now there was a reason behind doing this. Okay, so first, the why did we move to the constant field scaling? We wanted to ensure that even if I make my devices smaller, right? Let me just write it. Even if I make my device smaller, I want it to be reliable. And how do I make sure that my device is reliable? I have to make sure that the fields, electric fields that are present within the device, they are not scaled. They will remain as it is. Correct? So that I don't face any kind of breakdown within my device. Correct? So now what we decided? We decided to scale all the dimensions, the physical dimensions, by the factor of k. K may be something like 0.7, and all the voltages also by the same factor k over here. Correct? Now there is one interesting thing, that the doping concentration that you are seeing over here, it has actually increased, and we will see the reason in the next slides why we have to increase the doping concentration over here. Correct? So as you can see, the electric field has been maintained constant. It is as it is. Correct? Now the depletion widths have to be reduced because we want to reduce all the dimensions. Correct? What about the capacitance? So sir must have told you this. Capacitance per unit area, if you look, it is nothing but epsilon ox by T ox. If I am scaling T ox by the factor k over here, then I am capacitance per unit area is actually increasing. Capacitance per unit area is actually increasing because k is less than 1. But if I multiply this capacitance per unit area with the area dimension, that is width into length, width and lengths, right, they are scaling by the factor k, as well as length is scaling by the factor of k. So now if you multiply both of them, you will get k square into 1 upon k. So that means total capacitance is actually being scaled by the factor k. That means it is decreasing. Correct? So now all other stuff, only few I will highlight over here. If you look at the power dissipation, it actually reduces by the factor k square. So if my k was 0.7, the k square value will be very close to 0.49. Right? So what does this mean? 50% reduction in the power. Now just imagine what kind of effect it will do if I am able to reduce the power consumption of all these 285 processor cores by 50%, as well as this 10,000 GPU cards by 50%. So this $3.2 million, that the cost that you are seeing over here, it will go down by a lot, because so much of power I am saving because I was able to make my processors smaller. Correct? So this is one of the important things. And if you look at the circuit delay time, correct? So how will you look at this circuit? So the best way to look at is to assume that I have some current I, right, and it is charged, it is trying to charge a capacitor C. Correct? You know that I is equal to C dV by dt. I is equal to C dV by dt. Correct? So dV I can write as delta V, and dt I can write as delta t. Correct? So now if you just look over here, the delay time, this delay time will be nothing but C times delta V divided by I. This will be the delay time that will be required. So now if you look over here, now since my C is also scaled by the factor k, delta V, delta I are not changing. Correct? Though you can see that the delay time has also reduced by the factor k. That means my circuit has become faster. I can clock my processor at a faster speed, so it can give me a good performance. Instead of running at 1 gigahertz, my processor now can run at 1.5 gigahertz. Correct? So this is what this terminology means over here. Now the thing that I had told you about, why are we increasing the doping concentration? So now what is actually happening? We are continuously reducing the size of the MOSFET, right? So we are scaling this length dimension over here. Correct? Now what will happen at one point? This length that you are seeing over here, the channel length, it will become comparable to the depletion width. Or depletion width. Just a minute. The depletion width has not been shown over here. Correct? So if I just draw depletion width around the drain region over here, correct, then this depletion width that you are seeing over here, it will start to become comparable with the dimensions of the L. Correct? Now if I want to make sure that the depletion region will be created only because of the application of the gate voltage and not because of the depletion region, I have to make sure that if I scale down the factor L, I also scale down this factor depletion width that is present around the source and drain region. Now what is the formula of depletion width? It is nothing but the same formula for the PN junction. Now what you can see over here, if I want to scale down, correct, I want to scale this down. Correct? So this VD, that means the drain voltage that I am applying over here. Correct? Let's say I am applying a VDD voltage over here, any voltage maybe. So now that is also going to get scaled by the factor K. Correct? That is also going to scale by the factor K. Correct? So now if I want to make sure that the depletion region should reduce over here, correct? The depletion region should reduce in this particular case. Then I have to make this Na as Na by K. Once you do that, only then you will ensure that the XD also reduces in some amount with respect to when the channel length is also reducing, so that this depletion width over here does not consume a lot of portion from this particular channel length. So I hope this reason is clear. I guess sir has not explained this reason why substrate doping needs to be reduced, substrate doping needs to be increased along with the scaling. Okay, so now as I told you, like with respect to constant field as well as the generalized scaling, so now what were the problems that we faced in the constant field scaling? So the first of all, you cannot continuously scale the physical dimensions and the voltage dimensions with the same factor. At some point there will hit a limit on how low you can bring your voltage down, correct? And one of the first issue that will come up is that we cannot scale down the threshold voltage of the MOSFET to a very low value, correct? We cannot scale down the threshold voltage of the MOSFET to a very low value. Now what is the problem of doing this? So again, this diagram has been taken from the lecture material. See, what I want to do, when the MOSFET is on, right? When the MOSFET is on, I let's say want to have a 1 microamperes of current, and when the MOSFET is actually off, I at least want to make sure that off current is at least 10 to the power 4 times smaller than my on current, correct? At least I want to make this ratio around 10 to the power 4. Now why is it the case? Why can't I have 10 to the power minus 1? Now when your MOSFETs, there are almost 50 billion to 75 billion transistors, correct? 50 to 75 billion transistors present in NVIDIA's latest GPU. You can search for this, okay? This number will be somewhere between 50 to 75 billion transistors. Now if I just have a 10 times reduction in the off current, that means if my on current is 1 microampere and my off current is close to 100 nanoamperes, correct? That means first of all my device has not been turned off properly. That means even when my devices, I wanted them to turn off, they will consume around 100 nanoamperes of current even when no load has been given to that processor. If you have some processor cores, it will consume a full current only when that processor has been maxed out till its computational capacity. But if I am not giving any load to that processor, ideally it should not consume any current, correct? Now if you multiply this number with this particular number over here, suddenly you will see that the amperes of current the processor is consuming even when I am not giving any load to it, correct? So if you have your PC as it is, if you are not doing anything, not watching video, not doing any web surfing kind of thing, you will see that amperes of current will be consumed by your processor and it will affect the battery performance. You will start complaining that why my battery is draining so quickly. So it is very important to make sure that this I-off number is very low so that the MOSFET does not consume a lot of current when it is sitting idle. So I hope first this point is very much clear why I want this ratio to be as high as possible, correct? So what does this mean now? We understood we want this ion to I-off ratio to be very high. Now to have this ratio very high, what I have to ensure? See, we have seen the sub-threshold swing, right? Just a minute, let me check if I have a slide. Okay, I don't have a slide. So we have seen the sub-threshold swing of around 60 millivolts per decade. Now, if I'm telling you that I want a 10 to the power 4, that means 4 decades of reduction in the current, I have to change my gate voltage by 240 millivolts, correct? So let's say my threshold voltage was around 400 millivolts, correct? The moment I bring my VGS to a value which is around 400 millivolts minus 240 millivolts, correct? This is around 160 millivolt. I can at least ensure that there is a 10 to the power 4 reduction in the current compared to the on state when the MOSFET was consuming the current. Now if I bring this VT to a 200 millivolt value, what will happen? I don't even have this 240 millivolt of space. I can just make sure that my VGS may in the best case reach 0 volt and in the practical case may reach 0.1 volt because some noise and some other effects come up and you may not be able to give perfect VGS value of 0. correct? Now if I am just able to reach to a VGS value of 0.1 volt, that means only a 100 millivolt reduction compared to the VT point. A 100 millivolt reduction with respect to VT point over here, that means only two decades of what you can say reduction in the current. That means instead of having 10,000 times reduction or 10,000 time reduction, I am only getting a 100 times reduction now. That is not at all good factor, correct? So that is one of the main reason why your VT cannot be low. And if you read multiple books or multiple papers, everyone will say that, everyone will give this statement: lower VT means leaky device. Lower VT means leaky device. So this is the statement that you will find in many textbooks, correct? Now you know the reason why lower VT means leaky device, because you don't have enough room on the lower side to reduce your gate to source voltage to a value which would have reduced the current by this 10 to the power 4 factor. So your MOSFET will still consume some current even if you make the VGS 0.1 volt. Correct? That what happens in the case of VT is equal to 400 millivolt. If you are able to make VGS is equal to 0.1 volt, there is a 300 millivolts of reduction. Correct? 300 millivolts of reduction means what? 10 to the power 5 times reduction in the current compared to the on case, which is a very good value. Correct? So what do you mean? So from the case of on and off of the MOSFET, I want my VT to be on the higher side. Correct? So that my off current can be very less compared to the on current. But what do I want from the MOSFET actually? Right? When the MOSFET is on, correct? If I have a lower threshold voltage, what happens to the ID? So let's say this is K times VGS minus VTH the whole square. If my threshold voltage is less, I can get a more current from the MOSFET. More current from the MOSFET means fast charging and discharging of this capacitor, which will actually help me. Correct? So from this performance point of view, I want this VTH to be as low as possible. But from this on-off point of view, which will ultimately decide how much power consumption my processor will do when it is in the idle state, that is when it is not doing anything. Correct? So from this point of view, I want this VT to be higher. So there is a trade-off that you can see. This slide has been taken from the UC Berkeley lecture notes. So you can see this has been noted as a VT design trade-off. Correct? I want VT to be as low as possible from the for higher on current point of view, but from the off current point of view, I need a very high VT actually. Correct? So there will be an optimum value of VT where you have to settle yourself. And from this also varies if you are a digital circuit designer or if you are an analog circuit designer. Correct? See, analog circuit don't have the billions of transistors, okay? They may not have more than maybe 40 or 50 transistors, correct? And they may just consume maybe some 200 or 500 microamperes of current, or sometimes even up to 1 or 2 milliamperes of current. So I don't have to worry a lot about here. What I can do, I can reduce my VT a little bit, because this is just consuming a very low power. Okay, it is not consuming hundreds of amperes of current from the supply. Correct? So in this particular case of the analog circuits, I can at least I can sacrifice a little bit. I can, even if I have a little bit of off current, I can at least work with that. Correct? But in case of the digital circuits, like what? Like your processor circuit as well as your DRAM memory. So what is this DRAM memory? Right? You must have heard that you have something called as RAM of your PC or as well as in your mobile. What does this RAM made up of? It is made up of a DRAM memory cell. Correct? I'm not going into details. I'm just telling you some stuff. You can actually Google it or you can take some advanced course maybe. Correct? So now if the problem over here is that if you have a high leakage current, that is if your IOF is high, correct, then you have to increase the refresh rate over here, which will again consume the power. Correct? So in the kind of the digital circuits like processor and memory, you can't afford to have high off current. But in case of the analog circuits where the power consumption is low, you can actually afford it and you can reduce the VT to increase the gain or to increase the GM of your circuit. I hope you know this GM term, right? The transconductance, that is dou ID by dou VGS. This Gm is nothing but the driving strength of the transistor. How strong is the transistor is actually. If I just give a small voltage change at its input, how much current, how much change in the current it will produce at its output. So this is what nothing but your transconductance is actually. Correct? So now this is again, this has been taken from the lecture materials. I am not going to repeat what sir has told. I will just give you a different perspective. So he has told you that okay, the cost per transistor, like the number of square, that is the area that are required per transistor, is actually decreasing, and that is what we mean by the scaling, right? We want to reduce the transistor dimension. But on the other side, the dollars, that is the amount of dollars that are required to fabricate a given amount of square, as I bring my technology node from 45 nanometer to 7 nanometer, it is increasing exponentially. Correct? So if you multiply both these curves, you will get a curve which will tell you that the dollar per transistors, they are still decreasing. But now what has happened recently, that is 5 nanometer and 3 nanometer technology, you will see that this only holds true if you have a high volume manufacturing. High volume manufacturing. Only when you give a very big order, a very huge order at this 3 nanometer or 5 nanometer technology, only then this dollars required per transistor reduces. Correct? So first of all, let us understand what is happening over here, why this cost is increasing exponentially. Now I will go to this particular slide which shows the photolithographies. See, you must have heard about this term called as photolithography. What is this term? This is used to fabricate the transistors. Correct? Fabricate the transistors. Correct? It is a process that is used in the foundry, and the machine is being supplied by a company called as ASML, that is present in Netherlands. Correct? So what I want you to know is the wonder of this machine, beautiful machine. What is it? Even with using a light which is having a wavelength of 193 nanometer, I was able to fabricate a device which has the channel length of 22 nanometer. See, just don't go by this marketing gimmick of 22 nanometer. The physical gate length may be a little bit more than that, but we can make a rough approximation over here. Correct? What I want you to understand is, with a higher wavelength light, I am able to fabricate a structure which is having a almost an order of magnitude lesser dimension compared to the wavelength of the light. Do you know what does this mean? It means that taking a hammer and trying to write something on the wood which will be having such high resolution, just like when you try to write it with the pen, right? Just like when you try to write with the pen on your notebook, you get a very good handwriting. Now if I ask you to do the same thing with maybe a screw which is having a what you can say a higher width in its dimension, correct, then you know it won't come good. Like, you will have a lot of irregularities. Correct? So what was the reason why we were able to fabricate the transistors having a 22 nanometer dimension with a light having a wavelength of 193 nanometer? The credit goes to these mirrors that are present in the lithography machine. These mirrors, as I already explained in the first PPT, that is the first lecture of this our series, these mirrors are made by a company called as Carl Zeiss. Correct? So they make your light so much focused that you can precisely hit where you want to focus your light on in the very precise manner. Now, what happens when you actually move to lower technology nodes? So the precision required for this light to hit on a particular spot. Now this dot is this much bigger, right? This dot is this much bigger. If I want to fabricate a transistors with almost 3 or 5 nanometer channel length, now this dot has to become very small. Correct? Very small. And to make sure that this actually happens, these lenses and mirrors that you are seeing over here, they have to be made ultra precise. So the precision, the irregularity of the glass surface has to be narrowed down if I want to fabricate a transistors which are working at 5 nanometer or 3 nanometer technology. Now when we are moving to the extreme ultraviolet EUV process, that is EUV lithography, correct, this machine costed around how much? 1200 crore rupees from the ASML. Correct? So when you are trying to do that, each and everything that is present inside the machine has to be redesigned and has to make sure that it has the capability to work with such a small wavelength. Because if I try to fabricate a transistor of 3 or 5 nanometer technology length with same setup and using this light, this 13.5 nanometer, because what happens, see, you have reduced your wavelength now, correct? You have reduced your wavelength. So let's say the wavelength was, correct, the wavelength was, let's say, I'm just drawing a sinusoid over here, correct? And now this is your wavelength. Now you have reduced the wavelength. So now what you're seeing over here, if I have a object, if I have a big object like this on both the sides, so now this object compared to this wavelength is bigger. But if you look at this wavelength, this object is having a smaller dimension compared to the wavelength. So what I'm trying to say is that if you have a light and its wavelength is very very small, it is very sensitive to even a smaller irregularity in the physical structure. So if there is a irregularity on the surface, right, the 13.5 nanometer light will have drastic dire consequences because of this irregularity compared to a light which is having a 193 nanometer wavelength. Correct? So I'm just giving you an analogy why the light having a smaller wavelength can face a dire consequences if you have a same irregularity which is coming from the setup which you had made for this 193 nanometer wavelength, 193 nanometer wavelength of the light, which is used for this what you can say the lithography process. Correct? So I hope it is very much clear why the cost actually goes up for the equipments if you are trying to fabricate the transistors which are operating at 3 or 5 nanometer wavelength. Correct? So now going back to the technical details, so we saw this graph, right, in the lecture, the long channel versus short channel MOSFETs. So now there are three things that I want you to note over here. This difference that you're seeing, it is increasing consecutively between these curves. Correct? So if I write C, B and A, then I can easily write C is greater than B is greater than A. But if you look at this difference and this difference, they are almost identical. So first we have to ask ourselves, why did this happen? The second thing that we want to ask ourselves is, this line is completely flat, correct? These lines are flat, but these lines are not. What happened over here? Correct? Why the current is still increasing when I am increasing my drain voltage? Correct? That is for the short channel MOSFET whose length is 0.81 micrometer, and this is for the long channel MOSFET whose length is 10 micrometer. Correct? The next question that I have to ask, that we have to ask ourselves is, this is where the VDSAT was, that is, this is where the point after which the current got saturated. This is the point after which the current got saturated, and this is the point after which the current got saturated. So if I just join them, it will come out to be a parabola. It will come out to be a parabola. But if I just look over here, correct, if I just take these points, then they are occurring at a vertical line. Correct? So these 3 points we have to take note of, and we have to ask ourselves what has actually happened. Correct? So first we will give the reason for this. Reason for this as well as this reason for this linear increase in the distance. Correct? That means the C is greater than B is greater than A. This relation was actually quadratic. This relation was quadratic. That means the gap between them was increasing in a quadratic manner. But over here, what you are seeing over here, it is just a linear scale over here. Correct? So first we will clear this confusion. Why that thing actually occurred. So now there is a phenomena that we had studied when we are looking at the drift current in the semiconductor, like called as the velocity saturation. Correct? So what is this velocity saturation? So we have looked at this curve, right? We know this equation, V is equal to mu E. The velocity is proportional to the electric field, but it only holds true up to certain value of electric field. Correct? And this value of electric field is called as critical electric field, which is between 10 to the power 4 to 10 to the power 5 volts per centimeter. Correct? Now what happens if you go beyond this value? First question that you should ask me is, just prove it to me that I will reach the critical electric field in my MOSFET. Correct? So now how can I prove this to you? Okay, I will do one thing. I will take this N plus structure. Correct? I have a oxide. Then I have a gate over here. This is my drain. This is my source. Now this is my channel that has been formed. Correct? This is my channel that has been formed. Now if I look at the horizontal electric field, correct? If I look at the horizontal electric field, correct? So this electric field is nothing but, what can I write? The VDS value divided by the length of the channel. This is the horizontal electric field that I have. Correct? So now if I am applying if I am taking an example of 180 nanometer CMOS technology, the VDD, the supply voltage is 1.8 volts. That is why we have taken 1.8 volts over here. And when my channel was long, correct? When my channel was long, 10 micrometer, then the electric field that I will get is just 1.8 into 10 to the power 3 volts per centimeter, which is less than the critical electric field. So my V is equal to mu equation still holds true, correct? But when I move to the short channel MOSFETs, where the supply voltage I have kept same, but I have reduced the channel length to 180 nanometer, then this value of electric field will come out to be 10 to the power 5 volts per centimeter. Now this is close, this is almost a critical electric field value. So now V is equal to mu won't hold true. There the equation you can see over here, the slope has reduced to 0. Correct? So I have to take this effect into account, and I have to rederive the equation. And when you rederive the equation, correct, you will get this particular equation. ID is equal to what? Mu and this omega into Cox Vgs minus Vt into Vsat. This Vsat is nothing but the saturation velocity, correct, at this particular value of electric field. What is the value? 10 to the power 7. Now what is so special about this? Initially, ideal MOSFET equation ID was varying like Vgs minus Vt whole square. Now if you look at this equation, ID new is varying just with Vgs minus Vt, correct? So that is why you were seeing that when the Vgs was increased, I was getting a quadratic increase in the current over here, correct? C is greater than B is greater than A. But over here, if you look, this increase, if I increase the VGS, the increase in the ID will just be linear. It will just be linear because my MOSFET is now operating in the velocity saturation mode, correct? So now this was one of the main important thing which at least cleared two of these things, why this distance is increasing linearly, and the next thing was why the current got saturated after a certain point, right? So now the way to think about this is, first of all I will just ask this question: is the velocity saturation, like the phenomena that I have told you, right, is it a good thing or it is a bad thing? Just give a, I will just give you a 1 minute time, just think about it and just let me know what do you think, this velocity saturation is a good phenomenon or it is a bad phenomenon. Just look at this curve and just look at this line. It's a good one. Why did you say that, ma'am? Ah. Yeah, so how did that make the sense? Was this hard, drain current value? It reduces for V saturation. So that's a good thing or that's a bad thing? No, okay, I will just give you 1 point. So let's say if I have a MOSFET, right? If I have a MOSFET and now I want to charge this capacitor, why this capacitor is coming everywhere? Because when you route it, right, when you try to make the connections between the two MOSFETs, so this MOSFET will see a parasitic capacitance of the routing trace as well as the parasitic capacitance of the next trace. That is, if there is a MOSFET present like this will present an input capacitance over here, correct? So now if I give the same VGS value, let's say I have two devices now, one the short channel and one the long channel, correct? So let's say case A means, let's say, long channel device, and now case B means short channel device. So now ma'am, you were saying that for the short channel device I will get a smaller current now. So what does this mean? This MOSFET has a smaller driving strength, right? Because for a given value of VGS I am getting a smaller current. So if I try to charge and discharge this capacitor with the smaller current, it will be taking a longer time or it will be taking a shorter time. What do you think? For a small current, it will take small time to charge the capacitor. Are you sure, ma'am? see, when I burn a constant current, let's say I'm burning a constant current in the capacitor, right? So now I is equal to what? C dV by dt. I is equal to C dV by dt, correct? Now, if I just try to plot the V, correct? If I just try to plot the V, it will be what? 1 upon C integration I dt, correct? If my integration is constant, then my voltage will increase linearly with the time, right? And that value will be proportional to what? That constant current divided by C, correct, into T. So now what you can see over here is that the voltage, if I give a constant current to the capacitor, its voltage will ramp up. It will ramp up like this, correct? And what is the slope of this line? If I want my capacitor to charge with a very, very small time, I want to make sure that the slope of this line is higher, correct? How can I get a higher slope? That is by having a higher I naught by C value. My C is not in my control, only I naught is in my control. So now if I increase my I naught, only then I get a higher I naught by C value. When I get a higher I naught by C value, that means the capacitor will charge with a very high slope. That means a shorter time. So now if I take a larger current, then only I can ensure that capacitor is now charging with a very small time. Is it making sense, ma'am? Okay, so now we at least now want to make sure that our MOSFET, if I give a particular VGS over here, it can give me a higher current now, correct? But now what has happened for the case of short channel, now this value that you're seeing, it is not square anymore. It is just VGS minus VTH. So that is the very big problem for me, correct? My current will not increase in a quadratic manner, it will just increase in the linear manner. So now what I have to do? I have to make my transistors bigger now. That is W by L ratio has to be increased for the short channel MOSFET if I want to get the same current now. And what are the consequences of this? So the MOSFET which is driving this MOSFET, now it has to have a higher current, correct? So what do I mean by that? Just like I told you, this capacitance may be the input capacitance of the next stage, correct? Even this MOSFET will have some input capacitance, right? And that needs to be driven. So even that capacitance will increase now, correct? So that is a big problem, that my current is not increasing the way actually I want, correct? So now, and another intuition if you want me to give, then GM is what? GM formula is what? Dou ID by dou VGS, correct? So if I just try to write the formula, it will be what? Mu n Cox W by L into VGS minus VTH. So what does this mean? By increasing the VGS minus VTH value, I can actually increase the transconductance of my device. Now if you try to differentiate this equation, if I try to write dou ID by dou VGS of this equation, that is a short channel MOSFET, what it will be? It will be just omega times Cox times V sat. What you are seeing over here is that there is no more control. VGS cannot control the GM of the transistor anymore. There is no way that I can increase the GM in this particular case. In the previous case, by changing the bias point, that is changing the VGS value, I was able to control the GM. So now that is not happening actually. So that's another bad thing. So even though it seems that the velocity saturation is a good phenomena because the carriers have reached the maximum velocity, it is a very bad thing from the current as well as the transconductance point of view. So I will give you another intuition to this particular problem. So now let's say this was the channel length that I had, correct? This was the channel length that I had, and what is I? I is nothing but dq by dt, correct? I is nothing but dq by dt. So now what does this mean? The amount of charge, if I just take a cross section area like this, correct? The amount of charge, correct? The amount of charge that can pass through this cross section area in per unit time. So this is what is meant by the current. Now what I was doing, if you look at the MOSFET, right? If you, let me just see if I have a structure of the MOSFET somewhere. I just don't want to make it messy. Yeah. So let's say this is drain and let's say this is source. Now if you look what is happening over here, if I have this cross section area somewhere over here, correct? If I have this cross section area, I was increasing the VDS. I was increasing the VDS to make sure that the number of charges that will be passing through this what you can say, per unit area, they will increase. Why they will increase? Because I'm increasing the electric field, I'm increasing the horizontal electric field. The horizontal electric field increase means carriers will get acceleration. Carriers will get accelerated, correct? And more number of carriers will pass through the same cross section area in a given amount of time. Now if I tell you that I have hit the saturation velocity, and if E is increased, correct, if the electric field is increased, now Vsat won't increase, Vsat will remain constant. What does this mean? I cannot increase my current because I is what? Dq by dt. If the number of carriers passing through a given cross section area in per unit time, if I cannot increase this number even after increasing the horizontal electric field, that means what? My current will not increase after a certain point, it will just stagnate as it is. So this was another third intuition of why the velocity saturation effect, even though it seems to be good, why this effect is actually very bad for the MOSFET's current, for the MOSFET's transconductance, as well as from the psi is equal to dq by dt point of view. I hope that is very much clear. So please make sure that this concept is very much clear. If you have any doubts, then please feel free to ask me at any point, okay? So now this was one of the point. Now the next thing that I had asked you is there is a slope, correct? There is a slope in this graph. Now why this slope is there, correct? So now you must be maybe very familiar with this, and we have talked about this extensively in the last lecture as well, right? There is something called as the channel length modulation. Now what is this? So now what did we say? The channel, correct? The channel which was initially looking like this, correct? Now it started to pinch off over here, and now if I start to increase the VDS again, this channel will actually shift to the left side. Now why is it shifting the left side? I may not have cleared it last time. The depletion region, if you just look, if you increase the VD, you are increasing the reverse bias for this N plus P type junction. If you increase the reverse bias, the depletion region will increase over here, and that depletion region will actually push away the channel that you are seeing over here, correct? So now what has happened? The effective channel length has now reduced from L to L minus delta L, correct? And you know from the MOSFET's equation that I is inversely proportional to L. Now if my length reduces, correct, if my length reduces, then that means I should get an expected increase in the current, correct? So this is the very simple thing that sir has told. Sir must have told you this, that id dash is L upon L minus delta L times id. So now the total increase, the way we model this delta L by L is by we just replace it by lambda VDS, and we call this lambda as channel length modulation parameter, correct? Now what are the consequences of this? So what are the consequences? So I must have told you that MOSFET in the saturation region acts as what? It acts as a voltage controlled current source. Voltage controlled current source, and in the linear region it acts as a voltage controlled resistor. Now I have already explained this to you during the last lecture. Let's see how many of you still give me correct answer now. Okay, so I want to make an ideal current source. Correct? So now this is a current source that I have, I naught value, and this is the load resistor to which this current is supposed to deliver this current. Correct? And what is this? R is nothing but the internal resistance of this current source. Correct? So for this ideal current source, I am just giving two options. R internal should be 0 or R internal should be infinity. What do you think? A very basic electrical networks question. We have already discussed this during the last lecture, right? If I want all this current to flow over here, what should be the value of this R internal? Okay, RA is saying 0. So if I just make R internal to be 0, then there may be going to be some problem. and that problem you guys only explain me, please, because you have already taken this during the last time, right? From where will this current go? I have I naught over here. Now this current will see two paths. One is the short circuit and one is the RL. Where will this current go now? Through the short circuit or through the RL? Current flows through the least resistance path or current flows through the very big resistance path? Least resistance path, right? So now this RL has some finite value. This is completely short circuited. This is a short circuit. So all the current will actually flow from here. So instead of delivering the current to the load, it is delivering the current to the its internal resistance, that is the short circuit over here. So now that is not true, correct? I want this R internal to be infinity. If R internal is infinity, this will act like an open circuit and all the current will actually go through this RL. Correct? So I hope this is important. Please don't forget this, right? So now what are the consequences of the channel length modulation? My MOSFET was acting as a ideal current source which was having infinite internal resistance so that all the current would be delivered to the load. Now what is the consequence that has happened? Now because I have my ID increase with respect to VDS, correct? Now ID is also a function of VDS now, correct? Now you know that for any impedance A and B, if the current between A and B changes with respect to the voltage that I am applying between A and B, this is nothing but your impedance, that this will be nothing but your resistor, right? So Ohm's law, a very simple Ohm's law. If I have V like this, V is equal to IR, correct? So what does this mean? If the voltage between the two terminals of the device is producing a current between the same two terminals, then that has the characteristics of the resistor, correct? Now again, if you look at this particular equation, ID is a function of VDS, current was flowing between the drain and source, and now current is becoming a function of voltage applied at the drain and source. So now this also has a function, this also has a characteristic of the resistor, correct? So now the resistance that was infinite over here, correct, now this is not infinite anymore. This is RDS, the drain to source resistance, and now I have a RL over here, correct? What is the problem? The problem is, if you what you can say, some current that you are seeing over here, some current will flow through this also, not entire current will be going through this particular path, correct? And now what are the consequences? So in the circuit design you will see why this our finite output impedance causes a huge problem, especially if you are trying to design circuits at RF level, that is for the 5G as well as for the automotive radar case. If you take the circuit level course, you will see the consequence of this RDS, what this RDS will do. Okay, so we have solved all these three queries that the we have initially said the distance between this, why this current got saturated, is it a good phenomena or is it a bad phenomena, and why we have a slope which is increasing like this, correct? So I hope till this point it is very much clear. Now what we will do, we will just take this DIBL, the drain induced barrier lowering, then we will take a 5 minutes break and then we will go on to the next concepts, correct? So what is this drain induced barrier lowering? So it is not a, what you can say, a very complicated phenomena. So this is nothing but, you know that the drain, if you just look at this energy band diagram, you can see that the drain is at a lower energy compared to source, and this is because the drain voltage is positive and the Vs is 0. E is equal to minus QE, correct? So the energy band diagram is always drawn with respect to the energy of electron. So if you apply positive voltage, then the energy will be down, correct? So that is why the drain is at a lower value over here compared to the source, because this is a energy band diagram drawn with respect to energy of electron, correct? Now what happens? So if I just draw MOSFET's cross section, I will draw it for the two cases, okay? N plus let's say this is my oxide and let's say this is my gate. Correct? I had some depletion region over here. Correct? I had some depletion region over here and a small depletion region over here. Correct? And then this was my channel that I had defined, which had a length of L. Now what happens if I make this L very small? Just a minute. What happens if I make this L very small? So now, okay, sorry, just a minute. This is N plus. This is N plus, correct? Then you have a oxide over here, and then on top of this you have a gate over here. This is your drain and this is your source, correct? Now what has happened? The depletion region that you are seeing over here, now if you have a VDS, now the depletion region will look something like this. Over here it will look something like this maybe, correct? So as you move, as you reduce your L, right? So these depletion regions that you are seeing, they will start to interact with each other. I mean, the potential of this, or the energy in the energy band diagram, the potential of this drain terminal over here, it will start to have some consequences on the source terminal as well. Now what are the consequences that we can actually try to think about intuitively? This is at a lower potential, correct? Now if I try to bring them very very close, there will also be one point where this let me just draw it with a different color. Point in color, maybe green. Correct? There will be a point where this depletion region will increase so much. It will increase so much that it will almost touch the depletion region at the source. It will almost touch the depletion region at the source, and when this condition occurs, right, it is called as punch through. It is called as punch through effect. So now, why is this happening? So first of all, if why is this happening? I mean, what are the consequences of this DIBL, right? So now if you increase the drain voltage over here, we will obviously get this value that you are seeing over here. The lowering of this drain over here, it will increase even further because I am applying even higher positive voltage to this drain side, correct? So that is why you are seeing that this band bending has increased drastically. This band bending has increased drastically, correct? And when they move very close to each other, correct, what I also expect that since this drain will start to have some consequences on the energy band diagram near the source side as well, I expect that this barrier that you are seeing over here, source to channel, it will actually get narrower. Now why narrower? Because what you can say, a region in the energy band diagram which is having a lower energy than the source is actually coming very very close to the source now, correct? So because of that, because drain will have some effect on the source, and the effect will be what? Since the drain is at a much lower energy compared to the source, it will try to bring the energy of the source lower. Energy, I mean, in this energy band diagram, the level I'm talking about, okay? So this barrier that you are seeing over here, it will start to get narrower, correct? And if the barrier starts to get narrower, what are the consequences of this? I will just give you an example. N is equal to what? Ni times exponential of EF minus EI by KT. If the barrier gets lower by a slight amount, there will be an exponential increase in the number of electrons that will be flowing from the source to channel, correct? There will be an increase in the exponential increase in the number of electrons that will flow from the source to channel, correct? So now if I get this barrier lowered because of the DIBL, now you will see an increase in the current because this barrier has got lowered now. Now one more question to you. What do you think, whether this effect is good or bad? This, if I am getting an increased current, right, this is a good effect or this is a bad effect? I'll just give you one hint. This effect is happening in the saturation, huh? This effect is happening in the saturation region of the MOSFET, correct? Where ID should be what? ID should be this K times VGS minus VTH the whole square. So now just look at these two hints that I have given. One is the saturation region, one is the equation of this current. And now just tell me whether this drain induced barrier lowering, from intuitively we can see that the current is actually increasing now. So it is a good effect or it is a bad effect? Any answers? Any hints? Bad effect, very good. So, what is the reason for that answer, ma'am? Can you please explain? Or don't type in the chat section, please unmute, or else it will take a lot of time. Exactly, you hit the bullseye. So that was really good. So now that is why I wrote this equation, right? The current should be a function of the gate. Now what ma'am said is by applying a voltage at the drain itself, I am getting some change in the current which I don't want in the saturation region to occur, right? This effect should not have occurred at all first in the first place, but because I kept on reducing the channel length so that the drain and source depletion region started to interact with each other, because of that the drain current will also start to change. I mean, it will increase because of the DIBL, correct? And that is an undesired effect because I have lost the control over the current now. The Of course I can still have some control with respect to gate, but if I change my VDS now, I will get a change in the ID, which is a very bad thing to have. Correct? So that's why it is a very bad effect. Very good. Thank you. So now what we will do, we will just take a short break of 5 minutes. We will be back at 7:23 p.m. sharp. Okay. So the break starts now. Okay, great. Okay, so now what we'll do, we will just solve one quick numerical based on the punch through and the DIBL concept that we have seen, right? So the punch through, the way that I have explained it to you is when these two depletion regions touch each other, then which this condition we call as a punch through, right? So what does this mean? X depletion width on the source side plus X depletion width on the drain side should completely cover this channel length, right? So this was the condition for the punch through, right? So this was the condition for punch through voltage. So now they have constructed the numerical on the same concept. So now they are asking us to calculate the theoretical punch through voltage assuming the abrupt junction approximation. So that means those PN junctions are abrupt and the equations of the depletion width that we have derived from for the abrupt PN junctions, they hold true. Correct? So now let's see. You consider an N-channel MOSFET with source and drain doping concentration of Nd is equal to 10 to the power 19 and a channel region doping of Na, that is 10 to the power 16. Assume that the channel length of 1.2 micrometer and assume source and body are at ground potential. Correct? So now first of all we will write from the our expression that we have written previously for the punch through. The channel length of 1.2 micrometer should be equal to X depletion on the source side plus X depletion on the drain side. So this is what we have equation number 1. Now this, how to calculate this width? So calculating this width is not at all difficult, right? So now if I just look at the structure over here, correct? Then this body is at a ground potential, correct? Even this source is at a ground potential. So the reverse bias applied for the source to body junction is 0. Correct? The reverse bias applied at source to body junction is 0. And the reverse bias that I am applying at the drain to source is VDS. Correct? So now they are asking us to calculate that particular voltage, that is this VDS value itself, which will increase the depletion region over here by so much that the total width of the depletion region on the source and the drain side will be equal to the channel length over here. Correct? So this is what we have to find out. So now if I look at the X depletion on the formula first of all, so it is what? 2 times epsilon Si divided by QNA, because we have a p-type substrate, into VBI plus VR. For the drain side, this VR will be VDS, that is the theoretical punch through voltage asked in the question, and for the source side this will be 0. But unfortunately I don't even know the value of VBI. Correct? So I have to get the formula for VBI, that is what? KT by Q ln of NA ND upon NI square. correct? So if I just try to calculate this value, this is what 0.0259 into ln of Na into Nd, correct? So both the dopants, that is N plus regions, source and drain, they have been doped with 10 to the power 19 concentration. So I have first of, and Na is around 10 to the power 16. So 10 to the power 16 into 10 to the power 19 divided by 1.5 into 10 to the power 10 whole square. So now if you calculate this value will approximately come out to be 0.874 volts. So now I got the VBI, correct? So now what is my job? My job is to now calculate the depletion widths on the source and the drain side, correct? So as explained from the previous formula, depletion region on the source side will be what? 2 epsilon Si by QNA into VBI plus there is no reverse bias over here. So it will be 0 over here, correct? So now let me try to substitute all the values in this equation. 2 times dielectric constant of silicon 11.7, permittivity of free space 8.85 into 10 to the power minus 14. VBI I have already calculated of 0.874 divided by Q is what? 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19, and Na concentration is what? Na concentration, let me look. Na concentration is 10 to the power 16. Now if you calculate this value, then this depletion region width on the source side will come out to be around 0.336 micrometers. 0.336 micrometers, correct? And let me just highlight this equation number 2 and this is equation number 1, correct? So this value that you are seeing over here we have found out now, so I can easily get the answer for this particular value. So now from 1 and 2 we will solve this, correct? From 1 and 2, 1.2 micrometer is equal to 0.336 micrometer plus X depletion on the drain side. So X depletion on the drain side will be what? So this value will come out to be approximately 0.864 micrometer. So now I got the value of the depletion region on the drain side. Now what is my job? My job is to find the reverse bias voltage applied at the junction, and that is the theoretical punch through voltage that I will be getting, correct? So now how will I do that? So this X depletion D is nothing but root of 2 epsilon Si Q by QNA into VBI plus VDS, correct? Into VDI plus VDS. So now what I will be doing, so I just have to square it up. I just have to square this value into 10 to the power minus 4 the whole square. Now this will be what? 2 into, again the same thing, right? 11.7 into 8.85 into 10 to the power minus 14 divided by Q is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19. Na is again 10 to the power 16 into VBI we have already calculated 0.874 plus VDS. Now this big equation you guys have to solve, okay? The answer after doing the final calculation will be the VDS value that you will be getting. It will be close to 4.8935 volts. So if you apply a drain to source voltage which is having a value of around 4.9, then both the depletion regions that we have highlighted over here, they will start to touch each other, and then we will get a condition called as the punch through. Okay, I hope this numerical was clear. Just a little bit lengthy, not a lot, and conceptually also it was very easy, just a lengthy calculations, not conceptually tricky numerical, right? So now I hope this is very much clear. Now I will be moving on to a part which is extremely important from the circuit designer's point of view, especially for people who in the semiconductor field who want to jump onto the circuit side, or the device guys who actually want to work in the RF level characterization of the MOSFETs, right? So this is a very important concept, and we will also relate this to a practicality. Like why I brought this concept, first of all, because this concept is very much related to the channel scaling, and I will prove it to you why channel scaling also helps in increasing the frequency of operation of the MOSFET. And once we reach to this particular conclusion, then I will show you some practical examples of the automotive radars and the 5G applications. Okay, so what is this cutoff frequency? So this cutoff frequency is nothing but the maximum frequency, that is a frequency at which the current gain drops to value of 1. It drops to unity. Now the first question that you guys will ask me, from where does the current gain came into the picture? This is the MOSFET. It is seeing an infinite impedance. Correct? It is seeing an infinite impedance. So ideally there should not be any current that should be flowing through the gate. Correct? But note that this impedance, infinite impedance that you are seeing, it is only at a DC. This MOSFET has a parasitic capacitance CGS, CGD. Correct? Equivalently, I can represent a gate capacitance over here. And you know what happens as the frequency increases? What happens to the impedance of this capacitor? It increases or it decreases? If I increase my frequency, will capacitor offer me a smaller impedance or larger impedance? This should be pretty easy, right? Okay, just tell me the impedance of the capacitor formula. Yes, very good. 1 upon omega c. If I look at the magnitude, right? So now 1 upon omega c, if the omega increases, what happens to this number 1 upon omega c? Yeah, omega is 2 pi f, correct? 2 pi fc, 1 upon 2 pi fc. Now I'm asking what happens to this value if my f increases. What happens to this value? This will decrease or this will increase? Yes, very good. So if frequency increases, that means impedance decreases. If the impedance starts to decrease to a finite value, then the current can definitely flow through it. Correct? Then the current can definitely flow through the gate of the MOSFET. Now this current gain frequency is nothing but if I try to extract the current out of the MOSFET by short circuiting the output, correct? Then the output current upon input current. So this ratio is what is defined as a unity current gain frequency, and the frequency at which this gain drops to the value of 1, it is defined as the cutoff frequency of the MOSFET. Now why are we so much interested into the current of the MOSFET? Because at higher frequencies, that is at RF frequency and all, you will always get a current that will be flowing into the gate of the MOSFET. Now what is the job of the amplifier? See, why are we not using the what you can say the transformers in place of the amplifier? Because what is the job of an amplifier? I will just tell you in quick 1 or 2 minutes. It takes the power from the DC, the power supply. It takes the input signal and it gives you the output which will have a higher power than the input. So the power that it is taking from the supply, it is getting added to the power that is coming from the input, and that's how you get a higher power at the output. It is, see, power has to be conserved, right? Power taken from this, power taken from this, some power loss happening in the MOSFET itself. If you subtract it, then you will get the remaining power at the output, correct? But what happens in the case of transformer? V1 I1 is always equal to, sorry, not V1 I1, what I am doing, V1 upon I1, correct, is always, just a minute, I am doing something crazy. Yeah. If I have transformer, let's say it is having the ratio of 1 is to n, correct, 1 is to n, correct. You know, if this is V1 and this is V2, then you know that V2 is equal to n times V1. But you also know that I2 is what? I2 is I1 divided by n. Correct? So if you just multiply both of them, then what you will get? V1 into I1 is equal to V2 into I2. So this is a conservation of power. If you take the lossless transformer, it does not give you any amplification in the power, but amplifier gives the amplification in the power, right? So I'm interested, that's why I'm interested in just judging whether whatever current is coming at the input, whether it is getting amplified at the output or not. And if it is not getting amplified, then that means my MOSFET has stopped being, it has stopped working as a power amplifier anymore. Like, that is the fundamental difference between the amplifier and transformer, that the transformer won't amplify the power between its input and output, but amplifier will do the same. It will take the power from DC and add that power to the input over here, Correct? I hope it is very much clear. Now I'm not going into the derivations of this because this involves the modeling the MOSFET as it's in a small signal model. Correct? After the derivation, you will get an equation like this. If you are not familiar, just don't worry about it. Just see what I am teaching over here. It is inversely proportional to L square. It is inversely proportional to L square. Correct? If I reduce the channel length of the MOSFET, my cutoff frequency, that is the frequency till which my amplifier acts like an amplifier, it actually increases. So now what does this mean? If I scale my MOSFET, correct? So with the scaling, if I scale my MOSFET, the frequency till which my MOSFET can work as an amplifier, even that frequency is going to increase now. Correct? And where is the need to have this kind of application? Your automotive radar. If any one of you have SUV or high-end car, right? This car is mostly all the cars today are equipped with the ADAS functionality, right? Advanced driver assistance systems. So now it has one radar that is just there before the bumper of the car, correct? And it works between the frequency of 77 to 81 gigahertz. It is 77 to 81 gigahertz. This frequency is so huge, correct? Just to tell you, the 4G signal that you get from the base station in your mobile, it is just 900 megahertz. Now these numbers suddenly started to make sense, right? If you are working at such a high frequency, first of all, I should check whether my MOSFET is being capable of producing the output at such a high frequency or not, correct? So now if you keep on reducing the channel length, your FT also improves, correct? But there is one more effect that actually happens, correct? I will come to this slide later. Let me just clear this slide first. You know that when the MOSFET is velocity saturated, if velocity saturation has already occurred, we have already seen that velocity saturation is bad for our MOSFET, correct? Because it does not allow current to increase beyond a certain point when the saturation velocity has reached, correct? Now for that saturation velocity MOSFET, if you look, the FT is Vsat divided by 2 pi L. Initially, FT was increasing if I decrease L in terms of 1 upon L square. Now it is just 1 upon L over here, correct? So if you keep on reducing the channel length, you would expect a very sharp increase in the FT. But now because MOSFET has been velocity saturated, the increase in the FT will be very slow. What does this mean? If I move to a very lower technology nodes, correct, the amount of increase that I will be getting in this FT will be actually slower compared to the long channel MOSFETs, because MOSFETs in the smaller technology node are velocity saturated. Longer channel MOSFETs are not velocity saturated, and the reason is we have already looked at it, correct? VDS upon L is what determines it determines the horizontal electric field. If you have a long channel MOSFETs, your electric field will never exceed the critical electric field value, correct? So I hope this is very much clear, and this is what exactly same has been written over here. Like because of the parasitic capacitances, the current will start to flow at the input, and this is not a DC current, this is a current at a particular frequency where you want to operate your system, correct? So now once this is clear, now let me move on to a very interesting part of today's presentation, how circuit designers take into account this FT. So now the first application is if you want to design the RF circuits for the 5G, correct? Now this picture has been taken from the Qualcomm's website, correct? I hope all of you know this company. So now what they have done over here, they have segregated the different regions, that is the different frequency bands that have been allocated for the 5G spectrum. Now these are the bands which are below 1 gigahertz. So even the 4G operates somewhere close to 900 megahertz, that is your LTE band, correct? And now you have one band between 1 to 6 gigahertz, and you have a higher band at 24 gigahertz, correct? If I use 180 nanometer technology to design my RF amplifiers for this particular frequency band, I cannot use 180 nanometer over here, because 180 nanometer MOSFET made up of 180 nanometer is not capable of giving gain at this particular frequency. And the reason we have already seen, the reason is this FT value, correct? If this FT value has to be, let's say my frequency of operation is 24 gigahertz, then the thumb rule that we generally follow is your F operation should be less than the FT divided by 5 value. So this is a convention that we normally follow. Then the design becomes pretty not very easy, but at least the design becomes what you can say not very challenging, or else you have to do a lot of work to make the device or to make the amplifier work in those particular technology at a higher frequency. So now what kind of technology I will use at 64 gigahertz? Maybe I can go with the 65 nanometer, but still I have to put a lot of effort. If I go with the maybe 45 nanometer or 22 nanometer, I can get away easily. I can easily work with these technology nodes and design a very good amplifiers operating at those particular frequencies. Correct? So this was one of the first case of the 5G RF circuit design. Now the next concept, the next application, I will come out to the automotive radar. So now what is this automotive radar? So now there are three radars that are present. One is the long range radar, one is the medium range radar, and one is the short range radar. Correct? Now why we are working at 77 to 81 gigahertz, then you have to study about automotive radars a little bit. It has to be related something to called as range resolution. So now this range resolution is nothing but how close two objects can get, right? Let's say I had two objects which are far apart, let's say distance d, and now these two objects are 0.1 d, correct? 10 times smaller than d. Now can my radar resolve these two objects, right, precisely, just like it was able to do for these two objects over here, correct? So now to get a higher range resolution, I need a very my signal needs to have a very high bandwidth, and it is easier to obtain a higher bandwidth at a higher frequency. That's why we went to this 77 to 81 gigahertz, correct? Now let's look how companies have designed these radars and at what frequency. Correct? So now what did I tell you? For 24 gigahertz, maybe instead of 180 nanometer, correct, it is preferable to go to 65 nanometer or maybe even 45 nanometer, correct? Then only I will be able to design the circuits. Now these radars have been designed at almost 77 to 81 gigahertz. This screenshot that you are seeing over here, it has been taken from the Steradian company's website, which is now acquired by Renesas Electronics. Correct? So they make these automotive radar chips and involving a very what you can say complex signal processing algorithms. Now what is the technology node that they have used? Our solution encompasses a state of the art radar IC in TSMC 28 nanometer CMOS technology. Now I hope you will not ask this question, why not 180 nanometer? Why are we going to use only 28 nanometer CMOS over here? The answer is pretty simple. Your frequency has increased so much that my 180 nanometer MOSFET cannot give gain at these frequencies. Okay, I hope this is very much clear. Correct? So again, just to tell you, they have given the frequency band of operation over here, 76 to 81 gigahertz. Correct? So I hope it is very much clear. These are some practical case studies. These are not what, this is not slide that I have made. This has been taken from the different companies' websites like Qualcomm and Steradian Semiconductors. So I hope you understood and will appreciate the importance of this cutoff frequency in designing these kind of RF circuits. The FT does not matter a lot in case of the digital circuit design. In case of the digital circuit design, so the only thing that matters is how fast and you can charge and discharge the capacitor if you have a very complex network of interconnected MOSFETs. Correct? So I hope this is very much clear. Now we will be moving on to the last problem for the today's presentation. Then we can go. This numerical is just introduced to give you a feel of the values that we get for the cutoff frequencies. Okay. So now a very simple numerical. A N-channel silicon MOSFET has the following parameters. Mu n is 420. Oxide thickness has been given. L is 1.2 micrometer. W is 24 micrometer. And threshold voltage has been given. The transistor has been biased in the saturation region. Determine the cutoff frequency. Correct? So now what was the formula for the cutoff frequency? The cutoff frequency formula was mu n Cox VGS minus VTH, correct, upon 2 pi L square. Now let me put all these values over here, correct? FT will be what? Mu n value they have already given 420, correct? So the Cox value I may not know directly, correct? I don't know the value of Cox directly, so I have to find the value of Cox by doing epsilon ox by Tox over here. Correct? So epsilon ox is what? So epsilon oxide is they have not given, so we have to assume some epsilon ox, so maybe 3.9, correct, into permittivity of free space 8.85 into 10 to the power minus 14 let me just look at the formula once. Let me just quickly check it. Oh, see, there was no Cox. There was no Cox, so I have to remove it. The formula is just mu n into Vgs minus Vt upon 2 pi L square. Just a minute. Just close it. Sorry. Yeah, just close this. We don't even need this value. Okay, just cross this. So now what we can do? We can write 420 into Vgs minus Vth value is what? 1.5 minus 0.4 upon 2 pi into L square. 2 into 3.14 into what is the value of L? 1.2 into 10 to the power minus 4 the whole square. So now if you calculate this value, then the Ft value that you will be getting for a MOSFET which is at 1.2 micrometer technology, correct? So now this value will come out to be around 5.106 gigahertz. So now with this kind of technology, correct, if my operating frequency is somewhere close to 1 to 1.5 gigahertz, I can still design a reliable amplifiers. But if you ask me to take this frequency higher than 2 or 3 gigahertz, then it will become extremely challenging to get the gain out of the MOSFET, which is made up of this 1.2 micrometer technology. Correct? So that's why we have just taken this numerical. So this was the last numerical for today. So as I said, the today's lecture was more about relating the concept of the scaling to what happens in the case of the processor, as well as the latest trends, that is the chat GPT and all. Also introducing this concept of FT, that is the cutoff frequency with respect to the channel scaling, and relating it to the practical applications like automotive radar, as well as how designers choose the technology node, that is the RF designers choose their technology node for designing circuits at different frequency bands. So this was the last slide for today, guys. If you guys have any doubts, please feel free to ask me. We still have 12 minutes left to finish the lecture. Any doubts? Was it clear the idea of the cutoff frequency and how are we choosing the technology node for designing the circuits at a given frequency? Was that idea at least clear to you? Okay, great. Any doubts, any questions that you may have that we have taken today? Any doubts in the channel length modulation, velocity saturation phenomena? Any doubt in the concept of this threshold voltage that we have seen? Why we cannot make it too high, why we cannot make it too low? Do you want me to explain any part again? We still have 10 minutes left. Okay, last call for doubts, guys. Any doubts? Last chance. Okay, great. Looks like we have finished before time. Thanks all of you for staying here for 2 hours, and have a great evening ahead. Have a great weekend ahead. Okay, just a minute. Somebody has just asked some doubt. Just a minute. For writing code in Tunnel FET and Gottfried in Atlas in Silvaco, how? Oh, if I'm not wrong, these are device physics. These are device simulators, right? Unfortunately, I don't have any experience on the device simulators. I'm a circuits guy, so I design circuits. I design systems, and I have what you can say. I relate the effects what happens in the circuits on the system level side. Unfortunately, you may have to ask this question to two other TS. I guess they are doing their PhDs. They are doing their research in the device physics only. So they may be using this kind of simulators to design different devices and see what are the effects of varying parameter. So okay, great. Thanks a lot everyone. Have a great weekend ahead and enjoy the weekend. Take care guys. Bye bye.